The late 1960s and 70s was a time of radical and sometimes revolutionary politics in America. It was an era defined by protest and war and immense cultural change. And perhaps nothing captures its essence better than the Black Panther Party.
Most people know them either for the iconography, the style, the hair, that kind of thing, or the guns.
There's also their famous slogan, which became a rallying cry for a generation of protesters.
All power to the people.
Power to the people. Right on.
Their story mostly took place in the big urban centers of the North and West. But a new documentary by famed writer and sociologist Tressie McMillan Cottom is shining a light on the largely untold history of Black Panthers in the South.
And I think it reframes what we think of as Southern history.
I'm Anissa Khalifa. This is The Broadside, where we tell stories from our home at the crossroads of the South. This week, the improbable rise, tragic fall, and fascinating legacy of the Black Panther Party of Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Storms, floods, and fires are ever more extreme. And yet, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is fighting for its life.
I've never been a big fan of FEMA.
FEMA's a disaster.
FEMA's a dirty word.
People are waking up in droves to the FEMA camps.
Can the agency survive the stories that have been told about it? And can we survive without FEMA? American Emergency, the movement to kill FEMA, is a brand new series from WNYC's On the Media. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
I am Tressie McMillan Cottom. I am a professor at UNC-Chapel Hill, an opinion columnist at the New York Times. I am Vivian's daughter and a North Carolinian.
Tressie's work covers the broad spectrum of American life. She's written about everything from country music to the racial hierarchy of beauty standards.
But also I have an interest in honoring the radical, everyday histories of the South. I want to take with me this story that I know is true, that does not often match the story that other people have about the South.
That's right.
That we are deeply layered and that our politics are far more complicated.
Yeah.
And that our history is not just about exceptions, heroes. It is about regular people did amazing things. And as it turned out, I knew some of those people.
And that leads us to her latest project, Power to the People, Y'all. It's a documentary film and oral history project about the first Black Panther Party chapter in the southern United States, which was located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Tressie has a deep connection to the topic.
My mother became pregnant with me when she was a member of the Winston-Salem chapter.
Oh, wow.
And in many ways, I wouldn't be here were it not for the party.
Founded in 1966, the Black Panther Party was inspired by the Black Power movement. They supported Black liberation and social programs to uplift Black people. But they also rejected the notion of nonviolent resistance, which sometimes put them in direct conflict with law enforcement. In fact, J. Edgar Hoover, then director of the FBI, once described the party as, quote, the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. And a big part of that was because of their politics, which Tressie says even today can be a thorny topic.
And that's usually an invitation for the audience sometimes. They're inviting me to say, well, now, they weren't communists. No, yes, they were, actually. And I want to be really clear, or at least on the spectrum somewhere between socialists and communists, depending on how you understand those ideas. And I think that it's fine to say it.
So considering the socialism of it all, what was the bigger perceived threat? Was it that they were Black or was it that they were red?
I love this question. Okay, so, Toni Morrison has this quote that the true function of racism is to distract us, for my work. I think the never-ending circular debate about is it class or is it race does some of the same work. Because at the end of the day, what mattered here was what we would say were the material conditions. Poverty, inequality, all of those things. And for most people, today as then, that is about class. And I fundamentally believe that the vision, yes, of armed young black men in black leather with afros was used to shock white America in the 1970s. But the real threat was not that they were black with a gun. It was that they were talking about and living, and in many ways building, socialist pockets of organizing and living in the United States of America. And so, yes, it goes without saying that racism and racial violence and all of that matter terribly to how class was enacted. But the threat was red. Yeah. I love that question.
So the Black Panther movement was founded and mostly based in big cities like Oakland and Chicago.
That is right.
So what was happening in tiny Winston-Salem to make it this kind of rare Southern outpost at the time?
The chapter starts in 1969, or formally starts in 1969. But these young people had already been organizing. Many of them were in student movements on campus. Almost all of them were enrolled in college at the time, Winston-Salem State University, North Carolina A&T. There was something in the air. Right? This is about a national political consciousness, and the way it filtered down to them in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, was that, they had significant victories during the civil rights movement, but they were still living with an extreme amount of racial brutality. Right? And so what they were trying to solve for themselves is like, how did we have King? How did we have Selma, right? How do we have this significant federal legislation, and yet there is still Jim Crow in downtown Winston-Salem? How are those things true? And the way they were reckoning with that conditioned them for the Black Panther Party message.
So you talk about this in the film, but the national leadership of the party was very skeptical of expanding to the South, right?
Yes.
So how did they manage to convince them to actually let them start a chapter in North Carolina?
So the sort of charismatic leader of the Winston-Salem chapter, Larry Little, travels out to California to meet with Fred Hampton and the other national leaders of the party and ask for their official sanction of the Winston-Salem chapter. And, Fred Hampton tells Larry, brother, we can't build a base in the South. And so his word meant a lot. And Larry, I think owing to his youth and his brashness, which I think he would accept me describing him that way, says to Fred Hampton, brother, what are you talking about, right? Either we are the vanguard or we're not. How are you going to free black people if you do not organize in the South? And it was not that the party didn't think the South was important. They just thought the South was too violent.
Yeah, the danger.
That's right. They said, brother, not only do they have more guns than we do, but they have the police. The police and the Klan are synonymous in the South. And Larry just kind of refused to accept that that was the destiny for North Carolina. He said, I know my people. I know I can organize them, and we are not afraid of the Klan. Protest
was not a foreign concept in Larry's world. Nearby Greensboro had been a famous site of nonviolent resistance during the civil rights movement. But there was another thing that made Winston-Salem unique. It was a company town, home to R.J. Reynolds, the largest tobacco manufacturer in the world. And Tressie says its factories were a hotbed of labor organizing.
There's this idea, especially after the Great Migration, where millions of Black Americans moved from the South to the North and the Midwest and the West Coast. There's this idea that the people who stayed in the South did so because they were passive. Mm-hmm. And it's just so not true. Duke historian Bob Korstad, who has a wonderful book about the history of labor union organizing in North Carolina, describes Local 22, which was the chapter of the Tobacco Food Workers Union at R.J. Reynolds, as the crown jewel of the labor union movement during its time. It was also a predominantly female-led union, multiracial, and cross-class. All things they say cannot happen in the South. It was fierce, well-organized, well-educated, politically informed, sophisticated. Many of those members of that union were also the parents of the children who would grow up to be members of the Winston-Salem chapter of the Black Panther Party. R.J. Reynolds eventually breaks the union in cahoots with the federal government, but the people were still here. And they told stories about, listen, this is what you do when you see injustice, right? This is how you respond. And the conditions for organizing were already there.
So we've talked about the politics and the organizing, but they also started some programs that were pretty ahead of their time and very popular, right?
Yeah, Cynthia is one of the women of the chapter and one of the principals of the documentary, Cynthia Norwood. And I just love her because she looks like she is a sweet, darling little thing, but she is actually a pit bull, you know? And I love that juxtaposition.
Amazing.
And she has this wonderful line where she said to me, you know, everybody talks about the guns. She said, but there were more services than guns. You know, the thing that threatens the political order at the time isn't that the Black Panther Party believed in armed resistance and publicly carried guns, as was their Second Amendment right. J. Edgar Hoover said they are a threat because they are feeding people, right? If the people come to see them as providing critical services, it will threaten their faith in the state. Right? That was the real threat, were the services, and that included their most famous program, of course, is the Free People's Breakfast Program, which provided meals to school-age children for free every morning.
This breakfast program was part of a nationwide Black Panther initiative, and it would later become a model for state-sponsored free and reduced school meal programs that feed millions of kids across the U.S. today. But the leadership chapter in Winston-Salem also piloted their own initiatives that offered housing and health services, including one that would have far-reaching influence.
The thing that the Winston-Salem chapter party innovated was one of the health programs that becomes one of the signature national programs for the party, and that was the People's Free Ambulance Program. They created a community ambulance service complete with a 911 dispatch. That was actually my mother's role. She was an EMT and a 911 dispatcher for the party. And they provided ambulatory services for the poor, Black, and indigent members of the community that the county would not serve. It kind of gets now rolled up into the national history of the party, but it was fomented right here in North Carolina.
So obviously, people weren't just going to let them do this.
Of course not.
Locally.
Yeah.
So what kind of backlash did they deal with?
They did interact with the Klan frequently. They have harrowing stories, actually, of the Klan trying to firebomb their local office, of being tailed and harassed by the local police who would park outside their homes and blast music and lights. So one of the more well-known events happens with the what has become known as the High Point Four, which were four members from the Winston-Salem chapter who were starting a chapter in High Point. The High Point police show up to evict them from the house that they were renting as their home base, and there was a shootout. Brad Lilly was one of the High Point Four. He's a principal in the documentary, and it is heartbreaking to hear him talk about that morning and relive the events. He served time in prison for that because a police officer was shot, but also one of the members of the party was shot in that shootout. And so, you know, street-level violence combined with state-level violence. It was a vicious response.
And while the Winston-Salem Panthers expected violent clashes with the local police and the Klan, the greatest threat would come from a shocking place.
Nelson was shot and left for dead in a desert in Las Vegas. Just a profound betrayal.
That's coming up after the break. You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. They make it super simple. Pop over to progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with coverage options tailored to your choices. Plus, you'll see which discounts you may qualify for, like the online quote discount or savings for paying in full. In fact, 99% of Progressive Auto customers earn at least one discount. See if you could save when you switch to Progressive. You'll feel good about making a savvy choice. Visit progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little extra cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
I'm Brian Reed. When I created S-Town, I looked at how secrets, lies, and the stories we tell shape a small, rural town. Now, on my podcast, Question Everything, I'm going bigger. Hi, this message is for Senator Lindsey Graham. I head to Washington to take on a law that gives tech companies sweeping immunity.
Is how these companies have gotten rich.
Senator Durbin's office.
Join me as I go after big tech on Question Everything from Placement Theory and KCRW, out Thursdays, wherever you get your podcasts.
Despite stiff resistance, the Winston-Salem chapter of the Black Panther Party firmly established themselves in the early 1970s. And they started to have some real success helping Black folks on the ground in their community. But at the national level, it was a very different picture.
So the national leaders like Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, and Stokely Carmichael become national and then international figures, right? That shifts the politics of the national party in a way that was not always aligned with what people on the ground needed in a far-flung place like Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They were also dealing at the national level with just a sustained attack by the federal government to delegitimize them, to terrorize them, right, and to paint them as enemies of American democracy. That created well-documented fissures among the national leaders. And then there were just like young people problems is kind of how I largely grouped them. Egos, right? Hubris, sexism played a role in like who was considered the leader of the party.
Tressie says all of this was exacerbated by serious financial problems caused by lawsuits and mismanagement. Infighting and major ideological splits in the party followed. And to the dismay of leaders in North Carolina, this pulled the focus away from the most popular parts of their platform, the social programs.
In many ways, I think one of the reasons why the Winston-Salem chapter was so sustainable, right, made such an impact, was because it was far removed from those challenges. They were still living in the community they were serving. So they really started to diverge from the national parties' conflicts, personality-driven conflicts, their political problems.
But staying above the fray proved to be difficult. By the mid-1970s, Tressie says the National Party's co-founder Huey Newton had become an increasingly erratic and dangerous figure.
Huey, by most accounts, becomes paranoid. Maybe for good reason, by the way. You know the saying, sometimes they really are out to get you, right? But he also started to turn on members of the party.
And in 1977, Huey Newton's paranoia allegedly found a new target, a leader of the Winston-Salem chapter named Nelson Malloy.
He is the one who sort of led the charge, along with Hazel Mack, to create the free ambulance program. Nelson, because he provided health care services was called in by some national chapter comrades at one point to provide medical services for a comrade who had been shot and injured. They didn't want to go to the hospital because that would bring police scrutiny. And Huey saw that as a profound betrayal, thought that Nelson was making a play for leadership of the party and had betrayed Huey's leadership. And depending on who you believe, Huey either ordered some of his comrades to try to kill Nelson, or some comrades took killing Nelson to be in Huey's interest, right? We don't know if it was a direct order or not. But we do know that Nelson was shot and left for dead in a desert in Las Vegas. Some hikers stumble across him, and he's airlifted out of Las Vegas, eventually back to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where he does survive, but has been paralyzed, was paralyzed for the rest of his life.
Like, how did the folks in Winston-Salem deal with that?
There was a profound amount of trauma. But Nelson's trauma, I think in particular, it was so public. You know, this was reported on in the papers. It becomes part of the Huey story of his downfall, you know. And I also think it's important to remember that for these people, young people in particular, they really believed. This was a collective act of faith on their part, the party, right? To be betrayed by a comrade was different than being betrayed by someone on the street. The chapter, however, always rallied around Nelson and his family, helped nurse him back to health, have helped shape his post-party life. He goes on to be a local political institution, serves as an alderman, all of those things, with, I think, maturity and, you know, the passage of time. The way they talk about it now is still deeply emotional, but now they speak of it philosophically. Right? They say we were all young and we loved the party for its principles, but we loved our people more. And that being betrayed by a comrade didn't change that.
So the National Party slowly disintegrates in this era. What happened to the Winston-Salem chapter?
Yeah. The Black Panther Party as an organization ceases to exist. Most of them try to return to their previous lives. They go on to graduate school or professional school. The chapter has everything from, you know, lawyers and preachers and teachers and that kind of thing. So even in their professions, in their work after the chapter, what they were always trying to figure out was, how do I keep doing the work of serving people?
How do you think this story fits in with Southern history? Like, what does it mean to Southern history?
Oh, yeah. I think it reframes what we think of as Southern history. I think we do still have a bit of a blind spot, again, about the role of class and labor organizing and socialism in the South. People act like these things are unheard of and totally incompatible. Right? So I think we still don't understand the radical potential of the South to not just, you know, save America from herself. Like, if we could fix the South, America would finally fix all of its problems. But I think the more important way of understanding Southern history, and what this story hopefully is a part of, is that, in fact, the best possible vision for America will probably come from the South. This is where the nation is born. We are where the idea kind of gets worked out in practice. You cannot, and I believe this to the core of my being, we cannot solve any American problem unless we solve it first, most, and with the American South.
The Black Panthers loom large in the American imagination for a lot of reasons. But Tressie says she was motivated to tell this story now because, just like 60 years ago, there's something in the air. How do you reflect on telling this story this year as we are celebrating / pondering our 250th anniversary as a nation?
You know, this is an incomplete project. And the last, 7-8 years has revealed that the threat isn't that the project won't be completed, but that maybe it has already been completed. That this is the bookend. That because we never, ever, ever materially dealt with the founding contradiction of building representative democracy on the foundation of enslaved people, that maybe the way we end is with a reclamation of a race-first nation. I'm not yet ready to give up on that. It has been a while for some of us. We thought we would never have to do it again, right? We had the long century of American social progress, and I thought that we had buttoned up some of our biggest issues, right? We had the Voting Rights Act. Well, we see where that went. And so for me, the 250th is much more like a year one than a year 250. Like, okay, if we were starting today, if the original problem is still the original problem, and it is, all right, then let's rebuild from here on up.
That's actually a much more hopeful answer than I thought you were going to give me.
I'm a little surprised myself. I tell you, part of actually, it's really hard to hang out with the comrades, which I invite you to come do, by the way. It's really hard to hang out with them and not be hopeful.
This was really wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being open to the story. It means the world to me.
Tressie McMillan Cottom is the co-director of Power to the People, Y'all, a new documentary film that tells the oral history of the Black Panther Party of Winston-Salem. For screening information, we've dropped a link in this week's show notes. This episode of The Broadside was produced by me, Anissa Khalifa, and our editor, Jared Walker. The rest of our team includes producer Charlie Shelton Ormond and executive producer Wilson Sayre. The Broadside is a production of WUNC News in North Carolina and is part of the NPR network. If you have feedback or a story idea, you can email us at broadside@wunc.org. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a rating, a review, or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll be back next week.
At first, I didn't think it was real. I woke up to this blinding light, and I was transported to another place. Pluto TV! Then I heard a voice.
Come with me if you want to live.
There were thousands of movies and shows, and they were all free.
Truth is ours.
It's just so beautiful.
On Pluto TV, free streaming of Terminator 2, Fringe, Arrow, The 100, and The X-Files may cause excitement, loss of sleep, and sudden belief in extraterrestrials. No credit cards or alien encounters necessary. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
Have you ever thought, this water is too wet?
This beach is too sandy.
Welcome to Beach Too Sandy, Water Too Wet, the podcast where we do dramatic readings of the most wild and off-the-wall reviews on the internet.
We read real reviews about everything from Vegas weddings, matchmaking services, and Trader Joe's, to caves, toddler beds, and Spirit Halloween.
You won't believe the things people think absolutely must be said on the internet. How else would everyone know that some caves don't have Wi-Fi?
We hear about the good, like the time a couple was happily married in a Vegas Denny's.
And the bad, like who knew people stole from pet cemeteries.
And the ugly, because when there's soggy lettuce in the Chuck E. Cheese salad bar, it can get pretty ugly.
Join us every Wednesday wherever you listen to your podcasts. I feel targeted by that pet cemeteries comment.
I know, I was about to say, wasn't that you?
That was me.
Yeah.